Well, hey, how's it going? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and today's episode is about building serverless applications. So let's say hi to our panelists, and then we'll meet our guest. Joining us today, we've got Bonnie Brennan. Bonnie, how's it going?
Hi, I'm excited. I know I'm always excited. I feel silly saying that, but I'm super excited because I missed you guys. We've skipped a week, did we? And then Samantha took my panelist spot. So Samantha usurped me, and so I haven't seen you guys in a few weeks. So I'm really excited to see y'all.
Yeah, it's been a minute, so it's good to have you back. And we've got Austin McDaniel with us. Austin, what's going on?
How's it going? And Bonnie, I'm excited to see you as well.
Aww.
And even more excited for our guest.
I know this is a very exciting guest. And I know I always say that, but for real, this is exciting.
What a great segue into our guest. As you said, we're very excited to have her, Simona Cotin. Simona, how's it going?
Hi everyone. Hi AngularAir. I'm super excited to be here. Everyone's super excited, right? I haven't seen you since ngConf, I believe. So for me, it's been like 2 minutes or more than 2 minutes. Angular is one of my favorite frameworks, so I'm very happy.
Wait, one of?
No,
there's more than one framework?
No, what? I was just trying not to play favorites, but definitely it is my favorite framework.
Cool.
I'm just kidding.
All right, you want to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, what you got going on, that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm Simona Cotin, as Justin mentioned. I'm a developer advocate for Microsoft. I work in John Papa's team, and our focus is web technologies and making sure that JavaScript is a first-class citizen in the cloud. So we're focusing on making bringing Angular and React and Vue and all those amazing frameworks to Azure. And apart from that, I'm also super passionate about serverless. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And one of the reasons why I love serverless so much is because ever since I started working with serverless, with Azure Functions in particular, I feel like my development speed has increased so much. So now whenever I'm working on an Angular project and then I need an API or I need something quickly to an endpoint to respond to some of my queries, in just a few minutes, I have something up and running somewhere out there that's accessible for everyone else. So
cool. Yeah, so maybe we can start off with talking about what this concept is of serverless and what people think about it and stuff like that.
Definitely. And I'm actually going to share my screen because I have some slides that I've been using in my past presentations. So we're going to walk through some of the concepts that we have in serverless, but also have the support of slides. Okay, sharing. And yeah, so serverless. One of the things that I like to highlight about serverless is that it's basically two different parts or two parts that work together. The first one is where we're basically looking at applications that depend on third-party APIs. You can think of this as maybe Auth0 or some sort of database as a service. And this is the type of code that you don't necessarily want to rewrite, or you don't want to spend time in your team to implement yourself. So basically not reinventing the wheel. And the second part of serverless is writing custom code. And that's code that's definitely custom for your application. That's where your application brings business value. And that's also known as function as a service. I think that backend as a service has been known and has been familiar for a lot of us for a very long time. And I think that custom code or function as a service has been maybe growing in usage in the past 2 or 3 years. Has any of you used some of the serverless frameworks before?
Would you consider like Firebase a serverless?
So Firebase, yes, Firebase is a serverless database, and I believe that Firebase has now Firebase functions as well. And I know that it has Firebase, it has authentication as a service. So definitely, when you're building an application that has your front end, your Angular, that relies on Firebase as a database, and then custom code through Firebase functions, then definitely you're building a fully serverless application.
Yeah, I think in the world of Angular, right, it's really prevalent that we're kind of in this like structure and ecosystem, right? If I think about, like, I go back and I think about building a web application, maybe even Angular JS, or back in the day, Knockout or something like that, I'm always thinking about taking JavaScript and applying it to my website and doing some functionality and logic, but still a lot of server side delivery of that application or that website, right? But now within Angular, you really have this front end client, kind of a single page application concept. And now you got to get your data and all this stuff from somewhere. And so it kind of almost leads you right into this right out the bat, kind of feels like.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, cool. So another like there's three different things that we kind of need to consider when we're building serverless applications. The first one is that our code, the code that we write as function as a service, and not necessarily like when we have backend as a service, it's still the case. We react to events, and there's different types of events that your function as a service platform will listen to. Some of them are HTTP requests. So we call that event an HTTP trigger. Some of it might be maybe a file that has been uploaded on a storage account. And you can imagine a scenario where we have a CSV file that's been uploaded to report some data, some IoT data maybe. And then from that, whenever it has been saved on the storage account, we trigger a function, or we trigger our code to run, and that code will process the CSV file. And then from there, it will maybe save the formatted data in a database. The other key thing about Autoscale is also about serverless is Autoscale. What this means is that with serverless, you don't have to worry about making sure that you're using a web server that can scale to a number of requests, or you don't have to maybe keep a pager on to make sure that you have enough resources for the number of people. So provide some resources for a number of requests. Your serverless provider will actually make sure that you have enough instances for how many users are on your application. And then the third item is that you pay as you go. So you no longer pay for idle time. Traditionally, you would pay like a monthly bill with the platform as a service. And that would mean that maybe only 20% of your CPU or of the resources that you pay for are going to be used, and that's not great, right?
Right.
It's very
one thing,
One
thing I think about when I think of like reacting to events, this might resonate with the viewers, is when you're building bots, like maybe I want to build like a GitHub bot, like when I check in some code, like it's going to do something like that, or like a Slack bot, like when someone mentions something, that's triggering an event. And those are like two use cases that I've built around like serverless applications and are like great scenarios for serverless like this.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. Yeah, I've also built a Slack command that will basically take a word that I've written and query the noun project, the noun API, and return a series of icons representing that word.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And I know auto scaling is cool. It's funny because so we have behind the scenes, right? Because I have special joys as a panelist, and I get to see a little thumbnail of each one of everybody. And so while you're talking about auto scaling, and Justin's like nodding, and I always know that there's something cool going on because you see Justin silently nodding, and I want to have that feature all the time in the little corner of my monitor. I just want to see Justin's face down there. So I know when I'm coding, I'm like going along doing my job, right? And have them nodding. Except then at some point, he's going to have to start shaking his head. Like, no, don't do that. That's bad code.
I get super excited about all of our content that our guests bring on here and talk. And yeah, the whole time I'm just, like
I know but you're not always nodding. So I know there's like a cool moment going on when I see the nodding head, and it's like, Justin's like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's true. I think Austin is tough audience, right? No?
Austin is the toughest audience, yeah.
Speaking of that, we got another one. Alyssa joined us. Alyssa, how's it going?
Yes!
Hey, everybody.
Alyssa!
Yeah, I was going to say, you really can't base how you're doing off of Austin, because sometimes he's like a robot. He gives us face of like...
Austin's here for our abuse. But it's
guys, I'm
loving
just like
abuse.
so focused on the content. I just...
Thank you, Austin. Thank you. I have one quick question. So right now I'm only seeing my screen. I cannot see any of you. Is that something that happens all the time, or is it just...
That's because Justin is sharing. So Justin is presenting you, and you can't see the little, but you can on your other, if you go back to your Google Hangouts, you can see us.
Okay.
But that's when you get the inception and you go away.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
I think they're designed to help you as a presenter stay focused. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd
but I just hear I hear voices that I cannot.
It's just us.
Yeah. I love you guys. Thank you. Cool. So the next thing that I want to mention about serverless, even though, so we have these awesome things happening where we can react to events, we can write code that auto-scales magically, we don't have to worry about servers, we don't have to babysit them, and we pay much less money. But obviously there's trade-offs, right? And one of them is the execution time limit. What this means is that normally with serverless, you have maybe a 5-minute or 10 minutes execution window. After that, your function or your code will time out. So whenever you're building applications with serverless, you need to make sure that you keep that in mind. Your task is very granularly defined. It's a small task. If you have very high intensive compute time tasks, serverless is not the solution for you. The other thing is that functions are stateless, and that's what allows us to build the auto-scaling functionality we mentioned earlier. So what this also means as a trade-off is that whenever we're calling functions, we cannot rely on having state stored in memory or on the disk. Or in memory, actually, or on the local disk. So if we want to reuse state, we either have to maybe use a queue to pass on messages, or we have to rely on a database to store some state.
In general, you shouldn't in general, you should not keep stuff in memory on your server, right? Because then you can't. Like you said, you can't scale, even if you're writing a Node.js app or something like that. It shouldn't be kept in memory because, when if you have multiple servers, right, you hit one and it might be there and you hit the other and it might not. So this is a great practice, even if you're not building serverless applications to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Thank you, Austin. I do remember, though, the time when I was writing Java applications that were run only on that one single server. And we had this huge session object that we kept in memory and we kept reusing. So that will not happen with functions.
Hey, Simona, I've got a question about that real quick. Yeah. Oh, never mind. I think your next slide is going to be the question I had, so I'll just let you go.
So now transitioning into warm-up time. I have a joke about this. So there's two ways of looking at this. You have the half full glass type of person. That's not the right order of words, right?
Optimist.
Full glass type of person or half glass type of person?
Pessimist.
Pessimist. So you could, if you're a pessimist, you would call this a cold start. If you're an optimist, you would call this a warm-up time. And this is basically the time required for us to get from your code being stored somewhere and having it up and running and executing your request. And you can think of this. So when before that, I was saying that you pay as you go, and you pay only for the CPU cycle and the memory that you're using while your code is running. So in this case, what this means is that we have some code stored in a storage account, and then whenever we receive a request, we're just taking that code, starting up a container instance, putting that code into that container instance, loading all the dependencies that we need, and then fulfill the request. And that's the warm-up time. And it can be anywhere between maybe 2 or 3 seconds. No, yeah, maybe a few hundred milliseconds up to 2 or 3 seconds. But I've seen this go even more than 2 or 3 seconds. So it really depends.
So would you, based on that, would you recommend this, right, for HTTP requests? Because, typical interaction with HTTP requests is like instant, right? Like I want something and I want it right now as fast as possible. Whereas, with things like bots or maybe like file storage where you're just watching, that warm-up time doesn't matter as much then.
Yeah, so I think that like even with bots, that's most of the times it's an HTTP webhook. It's a webhook, right? And maybe the bot won't respond in like immediately, 10 milliseconds. But I have a good example that someone was mentioning recently. So in London, we have this a thing called the Oyster card, which you use to pay all your trips with the subway. And you have to tap on when you get in the station, and then you have to tap off when you get off the subway. And someone working on the Oyster card was saying that they're using Azure Functions to make the payment for your trip. And I'm sure that that's an HTTP endpoint somewhere. They said that basically they don't really care whether you're being charged within a millisecond or you're being charged within 2 or 3 seconds. So whenever it's user interfacing and it's time critical, latency critical, definitely it's not recommended to use serverless. But if it's not time critical, if you're not users are not expecting for a response from you instantly, then you can definitely use it even for HTTP triggered functions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to clarify that for everyone because we were talking about that earlier. Is there any way to like make it keep one warm or something like that?
There's workarounds. We're engineers and we like to find solutions to all kinds of problems. One of the workarounds is maybe to keep a timer function that will call. So you know that your function will time out within 10 minutes, right? And if you call your function, you have your function calling itself every 10 minutes or every 9 minutes, then that means that you can keep that instance running. The problem that you might run into after that is that if you have if you need more than one instance, then the other users would still face warm-up time. So maybe you have a script that keeps on calling a number of function apps or instances. That would be one.
That sounds like a bad idea.
I mean, you're not paying a lot of money for that, but still, yeah, it's not fantastic. The other option, for example, the Azure Functions team is actually just brainstorming a new idea, a sort of hybrid type of serverless, where you would keep a certain amount of instances warmed up for your users, and obviously that means that you will have to pay for those instances, but still you run in a serverless type of environment.
What about?
So, go ahead. There was a question in the chat from Lars, and I'm just going to paste it in, and then after, go ahead and let Austin ask his question, and then you can check that when you get a minute.
Is there any way to use like WebSockets with serverless?
Yeah, no, that's the kind of use case that's not great for serverless, because eventually your container will be removed, so that connection will be closed. Another type of use case where serverless is not recommended is when you need to have access to GPU. You will never have access to that, or at least now you don't have access to that. So that's not recommended either.
So the question was, the serverless is not viable for implementing a backend for your application. And like I when I first found Firebase, I love Firebase, right? And I would immediately spin up Firebase for development just because it's super, super easy to do that. But maybe not necessarily for production, or for actually, well, Firebase is good for production. Back then, I think when it first came out, it was maybe not. But so would you say that this is good for implementing a backend, or really this should be more for not for that purpose?
So depends what you mean by backend. Definitely, if that's the immediate endpoint that your user is awaiting a response on, it's not the best use case that you will find. For example, if your backend includes tasks like sending some requests to, not some requests, but sending a bunch of email. You start a campaign and you want to send emails to all your customers. You have a 1 billion database, 1 billion customers in the database, and you want to send them an email. You just spin up as many functions as you need, and you send that email. That's part of backend code, but it's if by backend you mean the actual endpoints where you retrieve a list of users and you want to display it in your website, then probably you might not want to do this.
But if you have 1 billion users, rock on with your bad self, because that's pretty awesome. And if you, so basically, and it's kind of like what I did with Firebase. Like if you're using something to spin up quickly because you're doing so many proof of concepts and you're kind of moving and shaking as a developer, but if you have like a large app that's starting to scale and your users are depending on you and time sensitive, that's a good problem to have. Go make a server. But for now, but for getting up, spinning up quickly, this is like super perfect and easy.
Yeah, and there's obviously there's nuances to it. I know that there's people. One of the websites that is completely fully serverless out there is a cloud guru, and they offer cloud training. So they have things like user management and video streaming, and their entire infrastructure, everything is serverless. So you can definitely achieve it. And if you think of websites like maybe like very large stores that are running Friday, Black Friday kind of promotion or whatever, at some point they're definitely going to reach some sort of limit at their infrastructure. So I think that users generally, they're always going to experience some sort of delay whenever there's stress times.
So how is it? What if you're not a full stack developer? Is it like, are you going to show us? Show us.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can show you the way. So I'm gonna use Azure Functions in this session, and I'm gonna show you how we can create maybe an HTTP function and have it run locally. And then maybe we can, if we get enough time, we can publish it to the cloud. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is VS Code. And then I've created just a new folder. It's an empty workspace. And then in order to use Azure Functions in my local, I need to install this extension called Azure Functions. And I have it here. It depends on, like, you can install it on, you can use it on all operating systems, Windows, Mac, Linux. And one thing that I want to mention is that right now there's 2 different versions of Azure Functions. The first one is built on top of the .NET framework, which means that it only runs on Windows. And then the current version, which is version 2, is still in preview. Or beta, so it's probably going to be released in the following months, 1 or 2 or 3 months. And that one is built on top of .NET Core, and it's supported on all platforms, so Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I'm currently using my Mac. So I've installed this dependency. You can install it with Brew, and you have some instructions here on how you can get started. But if I go back to the extension, so it's here where I have this Azure icon. And you can see this is a subscription that I have. I'm connected right now to my Azure account. And I can list all the functions that I have created previously. And this is it. Not a lot. And then I can go ahead and create a new project. And this project is going to help me group all of the functions that have similar functionality, maybe. So I can do that. I have to select the folder. And then there's different language support currently in my local. Whoa!
Sorry, that was Lucy.
No worries. Hi, Lucy. So I can create JavaScript functions, I can create C# function, and I can create Java functions because we love JavaScript. I've chosen JavaScript for my project. And then I can go ahead and create a function. And here I have the types of events that a function can listen to. So I've mentioned previously an HTTP trigger. We can also listen to events happening in a storage account, events like a blob or a file has been uploaded in an account, a storage account. And you can imagine here the classical task where we have a bunch of images copied in a folder, and we want to resize all of them. Whenever those images have been uploaded, functions are triggered, and we resize them in a function. And then a queue trigger is whenever we add a message on a queue. And timer trigger is like a cron job. We're going to start with or maybe which one would you want to see in action? Bonnie, you get to choose.
Which one is your favorite?
Well, I normally use HTTP trigger, but
that's the one we want to see.
Okay. Hello, AngularAir. So then we have different authorization levels. Anonymous means that my function URL is going to be public for everyone. Function means that to my URL, we're going to append a token, and everyone that calls in that function will have to use that token, and I'll have to figure out what admin does.
Hold on. So where's your hello AngularAir? Oh, because we can't see all of it.
Yeah, so this is the panel with the extensions for Azure, and this is where my code is. So now you can see that when I've created the function, we have this new folder, Hello AngularAir. And we also have, when we've created the project, we have this VS Code folder, which is basically the VS Code configuration for debugging functions.
Hold on, can you go back? Where did you do that Hello AngularAir? Where did that come from? It went so fast.
Okay. So
you got to tell us when you're about to do something cool.
So we're going to click this icon with create function. So it's like a light bulb with a plus. I'm going to click that. I'm choosing the current workspace. And then I can either create an HTTP trigger or a blob trigger. I'm going to choose a blob trigger for this one. And then I give it a name. So
gotcha.
another cool function. Okay. And now for why am I making things more complicated? Because this is a blob function, I need to connect it to an storage account that I have available in the cloud. And this is gonna ask me for a path, like where, to which path do I have to listen to? So let's say that I add this images. I have to select the storage account. I'm going to use an existing one. I'm going to show you later on what happened here. But going back to our source code. So we've created our function in the extension, and now we have two folders. This is the HTTP function, and this is the blob function.
She asked you to show this, and then she walks away.
Did she?
I heard that Samantha walked in the door with tacos, so.
Yeah, because Samantha walked in and I was like, does she have tacos? So I just couldn't, but I can still hear you. Sorry.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
good.
Okay. Sorry for the inception. Okay, so going back to our HTTP function, what we have here is this function.json file, and this is basically a file that describes our function. So you will see here that we're defining a list of bindings. This is what we use to communicate either with the functions runtime or with some of the services that we have available for us in the cloud, like some databases or the queue or the blob or any of that. And then we define things like the authentication level, which we've selected earlier, anonymous, the type of binding that we have, it's an HTTP trigger, and the direction of this binding. So this is an input binding. So we are listening to an HTTP trigger. And the name of the object, so we can access the data on the request, on the HTTP request, by accessing the bindings array dot request. And then these are the methods that we're listening to. So by default, we're listening to both get and post methods, but I can definitely edit that. For example, I can say that I'm going to only listen to get methods. And then the output of this method is going to be an HTTP response. And then the code is, this is JavaScript. So we have a function that receives two parameters. The first one is the context object, which we use to communicate with the runtime. And you can see here that in the context, we can use the context object to log information, to set the response, and to we can use it for other operations as well. And this is the classic hello world. So we're checking whether the request has name query parameter, and if that's the case, we are returning hello name. Otherwise, we are returning 400 status. This doesn't work. Please pass me a name.
And is this payload response JSON by default?
Yes. Yes.
That looks super easy.
Okay, so now we are ready to run it in our local. Are you excited about that?
Yes. We just made an HTTP server. Yeah, right? We did. Well, we didn't. You did, but we all, participated in this.
You've watched me do it. That's like
time
with me. Yeah.
Feel empowered.
The cool part about this is that if you've worked with serverless before, you'll know that like even with Azure Functions, you wouldn't be able to do a lot of local development until recently. So just being able to run things locally and debug them locally, that's just insanely much better than doing things in the portal. And I'm going to show you, maybe if we get the chance, how you can just go back to the browser. When I say portal, I mean browser. So imagine, I mean, we're used to using browser to write code, but when you work in large teams, that's not fantastic, right? Okay, so I'm going to go to this icon, debug icon. And as I mentioned earlier, we already have the VS Code configuration for debugging. So that's going to be this run function host task. And you can see it here, all the definition and everything. So it just runs it runs this command func host start. So I'm going to go run. And this will start the Azure Functions runtime. And one thing that I didn't mention is that actually Azure Functions is an open source project. And that's why the runtime that we have available in our local is actually very similar to what we have. It's very close to the production environment. So it's what we have running in the cloud as well. And obviously, that means that you can also go ahead and check out the code on GitHub, see what the team is working on, submit pull requests. It's awesome. Okay, no inception.
Are you able to simulate load locally as well? Like if you wanted to have multiple instances of that function running?
That's a good point. I haven't tried. I have run load tests on cloud, but I didn't do that in my local. I'm going to ask that.
Cool.
Okay, so it's telling us that we haven't passed a name on the query string. So I'm just going to say here, name equals Bonnie.
Hey.
What about me, Simone?
And Austin. And Sam and Justin and Alyssa. Oh my God, hello everyone.
Sam's not even here and she got some love. You're going to have to give Brocky some love too. Don't forget Mike Brocky because you know he's going to watch this.
Oh my goodness, such.
Definitely.
We'll just say, hey, that's what you get for not being here. You should not miss an episode ever.
Yeah, so then I can go back to my code and I can even go ahead and debug this. So I'm just going to refresh and then it's going to breakpoint into my function. And then I can maybe inspect variables just like you would do normally in a environment where you want to debug stuff and you want to be able to do stuff locally. The reason why I've created...
Question real quick here while I'm thinking about it. So I see this is index.js. Is there TypeScript support?
Of course there is. We have TypeScript support in version 1. I believe it's being worked on in version 2 as well. You can see if I'm creating... Well, I'm actually not going to create. I'm going to make sure to use one of my very old functions. If it's this one.
But you got to make the little noise, Simona, when Austin asks you a question. You got to go, psh. Psh. Yeah.
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 No, that I love that question.
Yeah. Of course it works.
Okay, so this one has only C#, F#, and JavaScript. So it's definitely a newer function. Or I can enable experimental language support. Did you see that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah?
It was awesome.
Did you see how TypeScript happened to be here and Python and PowerShell and Batch?
Who likes
Python? Cool.
No one likes Python.
Hey!
Oh, no.
That was harsh.
Oh, no, you didn't.
I know people who like Python. Don't listen to him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I know people. I like Python as well.
I just muted Bonnie.
I know, I saw the pop-up. Austin McDaniel muted Bonnie.
That's terrible.
Hey, so then from the Angular side of things, at this point, I mean, we're just talking about making use of the HTTP client to make these HTTP requests to hit these functions. We're getting JSON back, so we're able to parse that. I mean, from the Angular side, it's just like we're consuming another HTTP endpoint at this point, right?
Yeah, Yeah, that's exactly right. So I've built things like a very ugly property suggester website. Let me see if I
Is it really ugly?
Oh yeah.
I gotta see this.
Let me see. Where are my things? So it should be proper. No.
Is there a Azure package that kind of helps you do stuff in Angular and things like that?
You mean for things like connecting to a database or deploying to Azure?
Just basically like services, wrapper services, or something like that that allow you to, get up and running a little quicker.
So I know that there's like the library that I came across today was library called Angular Application Insights. And that's a library that will help you get started quickly with monitoring your application in an Angular app. So do things like understand how long your request takes, send metrics to your backend. That would be a fantastic use case of serverless as well, right? You're monitoring your application and you want to send some telemetry to your backend. You can do that with serverless. So I think my website, does that answer your question, Austin?
Yeah.
You can see that this is a PWA. I think my website is either not working or this is just a terrible warm-up time, but no, it's not working.
That's usually what happens when you're live streaming.
Yeah, so this is a really bad, ugly website where I'm using a functions backend to query a Zoopla API service, which returns list of properties that are available for rent in London, because I was looking for a new apartment, and instead of using someone else's services, I thought that, hey, why wouldn't I just build my own function? And
I love you, Simona.
Right? I mean, I've built this website, and then I've also created a trigger function that will send me emails with list of properties, so that, I mean, eventually the goal was to create a machine learning model where I would understand if prices go up or down over time, and like whether it's a good time to rent or not. But yeah, so this would be one example. Another where we would integrate with Angular very easily. Another application that I built was a machine learning app. You've already seen that one. I think it's Doppelganger. No, it's 80s.
Oh, I remember this from ngConf because Samantha was a match for me.
Yeah.
And I was so tickled.
So what I've done with serverless here, I've basically created a series, two functions that will, one of them will listen to requests to file uploads here, and will send that function to a machine learning API that will give me a doppelganger, or someone from the 80s that I look similar to. And I've also, so that, yeah, that's not very flattering. The other function that I've created that helped me in this application was a function that will train my machine learning algorithm. So because two of the tasks were actually quite manual, if you've watched my ngConf talk, you will see that basically I've started by just downloading a lot of 80s characters pictures manually. And then I figured that I have to upload them manually as well. And I have to have at least 5 pictures per character. And I have to have at least maybe 20 or 30 characters so that my app is relevant and the model that I'm building is functional. So after maybe downloading pictures for 5 characters, I kind of turned back to my brother and be like, you know what, would you please help me download these images and find some characters and upload them manually? And then while he was doing that, I realized that that's actually the kind of task that I can automate using serverless. So I've just added a function that queries, uses the Bing search API. I just use a search term like Marty McFly, add that to the Bing search API query, and it will return me like thousands of pictures that I can just feed into my machine learning algorithm. Does that make sense?
That's genius, especially the part about making your brother do it. But then you go to get your brother to do the work for you, and then you go one step further than that and get serverless to do it, so then you don't even need your brother.
Yeah, well, I do like needing my brother, but yeah. So it was really cool, and I think that's exactly what serverless does. So ever since I started working with serverless, I feel like it has empowered me to work on all these creative applications and feel much more comfortable doing that. So instead of just spending time thinking, oh, how do I do this? I have to spin up a server. I have to do that. I have to, maybe I'll just go grab a beer and have fun with friends. Yeah. Now with serverless, I feel like I have to spend less time on that.
So how do you, in your function, if you want to use some other library, like how are you going to bring that in? Like, is there a package JSON? Like,
yeah, so you can, so from here, let's say that I'm gonna, wait. I can, so one of the examples that I have is retrieving data from a Cosmos DB instance. Cosmos DB is a database, a NoSQL database, available in the cloud in Azure. So I can just go ahead and run. Hello, Lucy. npm init, leave everything default. Yes, this is perfectly fine. No time wasted, no energy wasted. And this has created a package.json file at the root of my project. And then I run npm install. And this will install node modules for our application. The great part here is that because we have our node modules at application level, that means that we can share those modules in between functions. So then in my function, I can go ahead and do, const mongo request, and then mongodb, and so on. And then I'm going to use this here. Does that help, Justin?
Yeah, exactly what I was wondering. So then you have this, like, there's a certain degree of how far you can go with the dependencies that you need on here before you might need your own, backend or hosted service or something like that. Like, for example, if you needed to connect to like an Oracle database and you needed actual Oracle drivers on that instance, you're not going to be able to really handle that with a function. Is that correct?
Yeah, that should be right, unless you have like here we're going to connect to a MongoDB that's hosted somewhere in the cloud. That should be fine. If I'm writing a Java application and I need that Oracle driver, I can definitely import it in my application, and that's fine. The more dependencies you have, the longer your startup time or the longer your warm-up time will be. So you have to be conscious of that as well. One of the things that we can do to reduce that time is share connections to the database. So you can imagine, I can show you some of the, I have a repository here that I've worked on recently to test how much time I'm saving by sharing a connection between my functions or between runs. So even though I mentioned that you shouldn't rely on creating like data that's saved in between runs, actually in reality we're gonna reuse the same container a couple of times until that's gonna be deleted. So in order to save time, you can share the MongoDB connection. So what I'm doing here is I have this this file utils.js where I'm importing the MongoDB package, and then I'm creating the connection, and then I'm returning that as part of my function. And then for example, in get puppies, I am importing that connection. I'm calling connect, and then I'm querying. I'm executing a query. So without the connection reuse that you see here, a call was taking around 600 milliseconds every single time, whereas with connection reuse or connection pooling, right, kind of, it was taking 200 milliseconds. So 3 times less the time. And I thought that was brilliant. So I recommend reusing some of that connection, but I've moved away completely from your question, Justin. That's what happens when I don't see people that I'm talking with.
That's quite all right, because then we explore other avenues and get more information. So it's great.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to mention, I think that should be related to your question as well. Whenever we're creating functions, there's quite an amazing integration with other cloud resources. So if I go back to my previous function, the one that we've seen earlier, there's in the browser, there's this integrate panel where I can define inputs. So say, for example, I want to listen to a connection to a Cosmos DB instance. So I want to listen to events happening on Cosmos DB. Like, for example, whenever a new record has been added to my collection, I can do that with functions by just going on this page, and then I'm defining the object that I want to work with, what's the database that I want to query, what's the collection name, and then I'm also finding the database that I want to connect to, as selecting one of the ones that are listed here. So this is what you have in the portal. And then in order to install, to have a similar experience in your local, what we have to do is install an extension. For example, a Cosmos DB extension in my local, and I would do that by using the CLI here. Just do things like func install extension, almost like we do with npm. And then I would say Cosmos DB and give it the version. And then I'm able to use think that's what bindings help us with. We would use that connection to Cosmos DB as a binding. So my point here was to say that it's easy to, even though like once you have more integration with more services, actually your provider will help you with that. So it's not only Azure, all the rest of the providers will normally have great integration out of the box, designed for serverless with other services.
Have you seen people as they approach this and start thinking about, when do I how far do I go with serverless? I get excited about it. I can make these functions. It's pretty clean. It's like this little isolated chunks of things I can do get and post and put and delete. Like, is there a danger of, or maybe it's warranted and welcome of just saying, well, I'm not even going to build an endpoint for my API. I'm just going to build individual functions to handle all that stuff.
Yeah. So, oh, you mean have people go create very, very small types of tasks, or
Yeah, like if I'm sitting here going, okay, I need to build something that lists out orders and allows placement of an order and edit of products or something like that, and I need to build an API backend for that. Oh, functions are awesome. They're easy to do. They're self-contained. Like, can I just micro break all that in and just have a bunch of those?
that
Like how do you? How's that mindset play in? Like, is that something we want or not? Or
that's actually recommended, right? Because and it is recommended because if you think of all those tasks that you've mentioned, it might happen that some of them are so think about you have a function that's creating orders, a function that's reading users, or you might have certain tasks that are called more often than others. And I think that breaking them down, obviously, it helps you test them better, isolate them. But also, if you think of this in terms of scale and pricing, so if you have some functions that are, or some functionality that's called and used more often than other, with serverless, that kind of functionality will be scaled out of the box quite easily, whereas you won't pay you won't have to scale everything at the same time. You will just scale the parts of your application that are most used.
yeah, it's very cool. It's it's different paradigm of way of thinking as we move forward of how do we tackle these problems, and having this in the bag as an option here is really start thinking about. But like you mentioned before, you mentioned and Austin, reiterated this that we're talking HTTP, we're talking stateless, right? And so it really fits well.
Yeah. And another scenario that I was talking with Nick Graff. He used to work with Serverless Framework, which is a framework that abstracts away the deployment for different providers. So we were talking about integration of serverless with GraphQL, and why is that ideal? And with GraphQL, what we do, we take, instead of having different endpoints as we do with REST APIs generally, we do have only one endpoint, and then we abstract the operations, and we can query different types, different fields. So what that means is that obviously all your requests will go through that one particular endpoint, which means that that particular endpoint has to scale really well, and it has to handle like from 10 requests to gazillion number of requests at the same time. And guess what? That's what serverless does, right? It knows how to scale a particular single endpoint or single task very well, and that's why serverless is also very matches very well GraphQL as well.
That's pretty good for scaling. A gazillion tasks. You got this. You can do this.
Very cool. All right, well, we're at the top of the hour. Is there any last kind of bits you want to add there before we wrap it up? You want to...
I think I'd like to mention again how cool it is to be able to run things locally and debug things locally. I didn't get to show all the goodies that you have with VS Code and the Azure Functions extension, but I highly recommend to everyone who wants to get started with serverless to just do it in using VS Code with the Azure Functions extension. That's been like the best thing that has happened. Otherwise, if you have any questions about serverless, do reach out to me, and I'm looking forward to learning what you're building, because I think that serverless, apart from being this great solution for scaling applications and building very good maybe background tasks, I think it's also super cool because it enables us to be very creative with how we implement stuff.
I do have one more
I
question
do have.
for you.
Yeah.
So is there like a pretty generous like introduction tier for people? Like could they get started writing some serverless stuff if they don't have a whole lot of traffic for very minimal amount of cost for them to get in there and start doing something?
So with all with all serverless providers, you will have a free tier, and that's like 2 million requests that you get out of the box and a lot of memory. So if you want to get started with that, that's super that's available. I'm trying not to say super easy. I know it's not great to use the easy word.
Approachable. It's very approachable, right?
Yes, it's approachable. And then there's tutorials about how to get started with serverless. Tons of them. I can share some resources. John and I worked on a play-by-play on Pluralsight with how to create an API using serverless.
Well, I know we're out of time, but I had a question too, but I've been delaying because it's an off-topic question. But since you brought it up, here's my question. And don't worry, we won't tell anyone, so you can be honest. What's it like working for John Papa?
Amazing.
Just between you and us.
Between me and you. John is just an amazing person. He's such a nice guy. He's so easy to work with, and he cares so much about people. I think that's the one thing that you don't see on the screen. Like, John has been my hero before meeting him and after meeting him. But before meeting him, I had no idea that he was so nice and candid. And I feel like he's always fighting for me, for us, for our team, and he's always helping us with different ideas. It's just so cool.
He is pretty cool. Yeah, I was a big fan of John Papa before I ever met him. With that, I think it was the hot towel and the very first style guide. I was a big fan. But if you hear this, John, don't let it go to your head.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great chatting with all of you, and I hope that this was a good feel for what serverless can help you with. I hope that Austin during this presentation has still raised his eyebrow and like, this is interesting. Do you give me your, yeah.
Of course, I loved it. I actually learned, I had some questions that I asked throughout the thing, so I learned quite a bit. So it was really great. Thanks for coming on.
I saw his eyebrows go up multiple times, and I saw a lot of nodding from Justin too. So that was a very good presentation, because if Austin's eyebrows go up and Justin nods, that's pretty awesome.
Whoa, that's great to hear. Thank you, Vani.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, do we want to do some picks real quick? Anybody have any picks?
I have one quick pick if you have time. Oh yeah, we have picks.
All right, let's do this. Bonnie.
So I'm going to pick a person, actually, because, you know, sometimes I do that, and I wasn't sure if I was allowed to, but I am allowed to. So I'm going to pick a person that you've probably never heard of. And this is a pretty cool developer that I think is going to be up and coming this year. So keep an eye on Josh Hicks at HicksDev on Twitter. You might not have heard of him, and I think he has like 20 followers, but let's get him some more, because he's a pretty cool guy, and I think he's going to be doing some cool stuff this year. That's my pick. Don't tell Josh I said that.
Dropping names. I love it. That's awesome.
Don't tell Josh. He's going to kill me.
All right. Who else? Austin? Simona?
Okay.
Yeah, either one.
Okay, I'm going to go first. So Serverless Days, London. Serverless Days is a community conference that has started in London as JFConf, has been rebranded to be inclusive, and we can see a lot of conferences coming up all over the world. There's going to be one in Seattle and in many other places. But the one in London, I'm helping organize, and it's going to happen on this Friday. I'm excited about it. Sarah Dresner is going to be there as well, so I'm going to be close to my team as well. And my second pick is the Angular Dublin meetup happening on the 12th of July. And I'm picking that because of Austin, because someone is actually going to be presenting on his work, which is ngXS. I'm excited about that. So if you're in Dublin, go to that meetup.
Nice. Very cool. Austin?
Yes. So first of all, I went and watched the new Jurassic Park. It was super awesome. Everyone highly, highly advise it.
It's out. It's out now.
It is. Second, Shadow DOM version 1 is landing in Angular 6.1. The commit got merged. It's official. Shadow DOM is now landing in Angular. And then the second one is how portals work in the Angular CDK. And great blog post talking about the Angular CDK and a lot of the hidden stuff. We actually had an episode the week before last on the Angular CDK that's going on that really power Angular material. That's it.
Wait, where's that blog post?
Justin will tweet it out.
It's on the internet.
Thank you, Justin.
All right. Anyone else? Alyssa, got any picks? I don't know.
I have, so it's an oldie, like I think it was published last year. It's a blog post, but it's a goodie because I've been diving more into Angular animations lately. And so I don't want to mess up his last name, but I will post a link to it. Alex Suau. That's got to be wrong. I'm so sorry, Alex. But yes, it's really a good post. And then the fun part about it is that there's a bunch of stack blitzes like chunked throughout the post, and that's like my favorite part. I was like super sucked in because I was just reading through the post this morning and I was like, oh yeah, this is interesting. And then there's like these parts in the stack blitz. He's like, uncomment to see this thing happen. And I'm like, no way. So I uncommented it and it worked. And I was like, oh, and then I look up, like 30 minutes later because I'm like editing the code and playing with it. So I love when that happens. So I think it was a magical post for that reason. So yes, I will post the link in the notes.
I think we should all learn that last name too, because that sounds pretty cool. It's to make a blog post into interactive fun is pretty cool.
SUAU. I don't know how you'd say that. Wow.
And you know who else is a big fan of Angular animations? Samantha.
I know. I'm actually going to talk to her later about it today. So.
There you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, Simona, thanks so much for coming on and sharing the time. We really appreciate it.
This was super fun. This was a really good episode.
Loved it. Thank you for having me.
All right. That's a wrap.
Oh, wait. I have
bonus.
One more pick. So I love Stack Blitz. It's like my favorite in the entire world, but I found this other tool similar to Stack Blitz the other day, and I was really impressed. So I have to give it a shout out. It's called Code Sandbox. They just announced support for Angular, Vue, React, all of them. And it's got a lot of really interesting things, some things that Stack Blitz has. Stack Blitz has things that it doesn't have, but it's definitely worth checking out.
All right. Got it in there before the buzzer. Like it. All right. That's a wrap. I think so. Yeah. Okay. We're good. All right. Have a good one. We'll catch you next time. Thanks. Later.